really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. And thanks again for joining me here today. I'm continuing on, though I didn't expect to, continuing on with my series on healing the wounds of childhood, which I started talking about a few weeks ago by looking into shame and other childhood wounds that we carry with us. And what I've been discovering as I've continued to explore these topics is the idea that we actually need to grieve at some point over the losses we experience in childhood. And this began to make sense to me as I thought about my own work on forgiveness, first of all, of totally forgiving my parents for whatever it was that they may have neglected to do or mistakes they might have made when I was a child, and no longer wishing to carry any kind of blame or anger toward them for that. But then finding that just the act of forgiveness didn't seem like enough, because still I carried these wounds to my psyche in a way that didn't seem to be touched by forgiving my parents from my higher consciousness and even from my heart. And so I was curious about what does it take to actually get down in to the wounds themselves and open them so that they can finally be healed. And this week I discovered the idea that we actually need to grieve those childhood wounds. And for most of us, those wounds were not associated with the death of someone we loved. So it's not grief in the traditional way we think of it, but it's still the pain of something that has been lost, something that was not fulfilled or that did not come to completion when we were younger. And so this idea really resonates with me, and I'm intrigued by it. And I do lots of reading on grief anyway, but primarily grief associated with death and dying. And I'm familiar with a model for grief by Worden, and he describes the 4 tasks of mourning. And I thought, mourning is the act we put in place to help us with our grief. Mourning are the steps that we take and the things that we do to help us experience and process and bring our grief into the light. And so that helped me realize that's what needs to happen. We need to actually mourn whatever was lost in childhood that for us will be lost forever, essentially, because we really are not going to go back there and recreate the past. But anyway, Worden's 4 tasks of mourning are: number 1, accept the reality of the loss, recognized what has happened and that there was a loss associated. Number 2 is to process or feel the pain of grief and loss. And number 3, adjust to the world as it is. I'm kind of paraphrasing what he says. And then number 4, embark on a new life. And when you're grieving the death of someone you love, it's embarking on a new life while continuing to carry on the bonds you had with the person that you loved. So I started thinking about these 4 tasks of mourning and wondering how they could be applied to looking at our pasts and healing what was missing in our childhood. And again, it does make sense to me that when something has been missing, there's like a missing piece within us. There's a gap within our lives. And in the terms of grief over the death of someone we loved, it's an actual person that's missing from us. But when we had wounds in our childhood, it may be that there is still a missing piece within us, something that didn't take place or didn't happen that would have helped us be more whole than we are right now. So it makes sense to me that if we are not able to recognize the grief that's present and we're not able to mourn for the past, then we may not be able to fully heal. And maybe that has been a missing piece for me in my own journey of healing. And Sarah Flynn wrote, "Grief allows us to cleanse ourselves of hurt and loss and continue to grow and to expand our sense of ourselves." So it also occurs to me that the areas in which we have not been able to grieve and mourn, we may not have grown as much as we would like to have grown. We may not have grown as much as we need to grow, and that's why this is an essential step to feel our grief and to mourn our losses. And I mentioned to you before that a number of years ago, I created a course on healing the hidden wounds of childhood. And I was looking back through some of the resources I created for that course, and I was a little bit surprised to see that I actually had a tool that I made for the course that kind of fits with what we're talking about here about mourning. I called it the 3 keys to creative healing. So as I studied Worden's 4 tasks of mourning and the 3 keys that I created, they really fit together and they're really talking about the same thing. So the first key to creative healing that I described is name it. And what by that I mean, identify the wounds in the first place. And here I recommend, and I've talked about this before, tracing your family timeline to discover the stresses and losses that may have occurred in your past before you have a memory of them, to understand what transitions or difficulties or challenges were facing your family when you were very young that you are not conscious of being affected by, but that still did have an impact on you, on your development, on your parents' availability or their health or their own well-being in terms of being parents for you and meeting your needs. So this first step, name it, identify the wounds of your childhood, trace your family timeline, be able to make a list of the stresses and the losses that might have occurred. And here in my tool, I stressed without blame or shame. And so the idea is not to look back at the past in order to blame our parents or become angry at our parents. We're doing this work when we've moved beyond that. When we recognize that the past is just the past, whatever happened, and we're moving past blame or shame because those really definitely keep us stuck in the past, and those are not states of being from which we're able to grow. So we have to move beyond blaming others, blaming ourselves, or feeling shame about the past. So this first step that I named, name it, really correlates with William Worden's first 2 tasks of mourning. Accept the reality that loss has occurred, to recognize that there was a loss, and also to feel the pain of the loss. So treating this loss as something real and allowing ourselves to experience that it's painful when something is missing in our childhoods, when we haven't received something that we needed. It was painful at the time, and that part of us has been coping with that pain for all of our lives. And so that's how we name it. We look back and we recognize what has been there, and we allow ourselves to feel the pain of it. The next step of creative healing that I wrote a number of years ago was to reclaim it. Own the past as part of the gift of your life. And this fits pretty well with Worden's 3rd task of mourning, which is to adjust to our world as it is. And I see this as saying to ourselves, this is simply what life brought me. This is what my life has consisted of. And I can no longer be angry at life for bringing me the experiences that it has. I need to be at a place where I'm ready to just embrace that. Everything that has happened in my life so far has shaped who I am today. I wouldn't be the same person I am without the experiences I've had, without the parents that I've had, without their flaws, without their best efforts, without the challenges that came along for our family when I was younger. So the second step, reclaim it, own the past as part of the gift of your life. And that's a complete mindset shift. When we see the things that have happened in life as somehow a gift to us, a gift, a tarnished gift, a dubious gift, but a gift that in some way helped us become who we are right now. And this gift is helping us in our work toward growing and becoming a better and stronger person. And so my advice back in that old handout that I made for reclaiming it is to learn how to cherish all of your life experiences with a sort of reverence, to view your life as a sacred gift in a way, as awful as it has been, perhaps as painful, as terrifying, to be able to view with reverence the fact that yet I am still here. This is the life that was given to me when I chose to come to this planet. This is the life. It's my life. And I still have the power to make choices about the life I have from here on out. I can take charge of this life. I can make decisions for myself. And my advice in this old handout was to practice self-piety, meaning reverence for yourself, rather than self-pity. So instead of feeling sorry for myself that, wow, I had some rough things happen, and isn't that a shame that I had to go through that, because my friend over there didn't go through anything similar to that in her life. It's me. I'm the one. I got picked on. I had to have this rough experience happen. But instead of comparing ourselves to others, to simply sit back, to kind of hold on to everything that our life has brought us, and to be willing to say, like I said before, this is my life. And there's a reverence about it, no matter what. To be alive and to be breathing here on the planet is a gift. To be here, even with the wounds that I've carried and the scars I have, and even with the losses that I've endured, this is a gift, a sacred gift, to be alive on the planet right now. So that's a form of self-piety or self-reverence, I want to call it, instead of feeling self-pity and feeling sorry for myself. And that's an extremely helpful and healthy shift in our mindset to get us out of being stuck in victim mode and constantly feeling bad about what life has done to us or what life has handed us. When we can set all of that, the blame and the shame and the self-pity aside, we move into a completely different space energetically, where we're allowing our life to be what it is. We're receiving whatever goodness has been there in our lives as they have unfolded. And we're opening space for something new to be created. And it turns out that is the third key for creative healing, as I wrote in my handout, which is to reframe it, to rewrite your story. And I wrote back then, find the good in everything. Rewrite your story from a positive perspective and nurture yourself with love and compassion. This is incredibly powerful, because when you decide that you can write the history of your life, you can tell the story in any way you would like. You can describe the characters however you would like. And the more you're able to look back at your own life through the eyes of love and with grace and compassion and mercy, the more you'll be telling a positive story. And it's a story, yes, with challenges and suffering and pain, but it's a story that has this amazing positive arc of healing. So find the good in everything and rewrite your story from a positive perspective. I realize if you simply listen to those words, it can sound like, oh, this is just more positive psychology. But remember, we've already gone through the steps of feeling the pain and recognizing the losses and the pain. So we are in no way bypassing any of the pain. In fact, we may spend months or years on the first two steps, recognizing the pain, experiencing the pain, feeling the grief, and bringing it to the surface. So we may not get to this place of rewriting the story for a long, long time because we can't jump to that part of the story. That's the problem with positive thinking sometimes, and positive psychology is that it encourages us to jump to this place of rewriting and retelling the story without going through the pain of recognizing the loss and feeling it and living with the suffering and pain of that loss. So we're not doing that at all. We're not skipping to the positive rewrite at all. We're taking our time and we're going through each step. And this correlates with the fourth task of mourning of William Worden, which is to embark on a new life, continuing on with the bonds of the people that we have loved. And so I think that fits really well. Rewriting the story, let's retell it. But we can carry on with all the good and all the positive. We will continue to carry the scars from the past, but we may no longer be stuck there, and we may no longer be weighed down by the pain of them and the pain of what has happened in the past. So I just want to reiterate those 4 keys to creative healing that I mentioned before, just to go over them one more time because it's a lot of information. That our first step is to name it, and that means identify the wounds of childhood. You can trace your family timeline, which I think is a great way to look back at things you may not even know of for yourself. You may not have any memory of for yourself. Identify the stresses and losses that may have occurred in the past, but you might also at the same time identify strengths, identify the good things that happened, identify things that were really positive for you in your relationship with your parents or your siblings or even with other adults. That's a really healthy way to look at it and to get the full picture as well. But to remember as you look back at the past, to leave aside blame and shame. And if you're still at a place of needing to blame and needing to feel shame, then there's other work that needs to be done first on that desire to blame and shame. There's more work that needs to be done in terms of self-love and self-compassion to help you get beyond the shame, but also some forgiveness in terms of just letting go of the need to make someone responsible for what happened, of being able to get to a place of a little bit more neutrality or equanimity, and letting go of the need to point fingers and to just sit with this pain and this discomfort and these losses as we move on through this process. So again, to even undertake this process, you have to be ready. And something Sarah Flynn said is you have to be able to afford to mourn emotionally. And that might mean that you have done previous work, or that you're working with a therapist, or that you have a strong enough support system, or a strong enough sense of self to be able to go through this process. So this mourning process we're talking about, this creative healing, comes a little bit later down the road. It's not the first thing that you do when you're tackling these wounds from earlier in childhood. So, okay, I reiterated that again, but just because that's so important. So the first step, name it. The second step, reclaim it. In this step, you own your past as part of the gift of your life. And some people will feel angry that I would even use the word gift. And I understand that, because for some people that feels offensive, to think that something that hurt you, something that was missing, something that has caused you pain all your life could in any way be a gift. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, and that's something that you also may need to set aside for now. You might be incredulous. How could anyone consider that a gift? But I just want you to set it aside. Don't latch on to that for now. And it's fine to say it doesn't feel like a gift at all. I don't consider it a gift. That's fine if you're at that place. My hope is that down the road that might shift for you. But it's fine if you cannot consider it a gift in any way. But I do encourage you to learn how to see your past as just what is. This is just what life gave you and what has happened. And as I said before, to be able to cherish the fact that you're here at all, the fact that you exist, the fact that you've survived everything that you've been through, the fact that you're here today, breathing in and out and listening to me talk. Cherish that fact. Even cherish it with a certain amount of reverence, because your life is sacred, and this has been a sacred path that you're on, whether you see that or not. And don't let yourself fall into the trap of victimhood and self-pity, because again, that's a deep hole that's very difficult to get out of. And the moment that you find yourself there, and that everything that has happened to you is someone else's fault, you can feed yourself for a long time on that kind of vindictive anger toward other people. But it's not healing. It will never help you grow. And if you can prevent yourself from falling into that pit of self-pity, blame, and victimhood, you will go much farther in terms of healing the discomfort that's there. So as I'm saying, there's a certain amount of comfort that comes from blaming other people, but it's not nearly as powerful as the pain that you will continue to carry inside. Blaming others can feel satisfying at times, and it must, because it's rampant in our society right now, of people blaming other people for what's wrong with our world or with our society. But the fact is, when you turn it around and you accept your own life as it is, and you decide, I'm just not going to be angry at anyone else. I'm just going to accept this is my life, and I'm going to do the best I can with it. That changes everything, and it would change our society and our world if we could help everyone get to that place. So the third step is to reframe it. And this involves retelling your story. Find the good in everything. And so continue to look for whatever was good about what happened in your past. What was a good thing about it? What is something that came from what was missing or lost that you could see as a good thing or a strength that you now have? And over time, work on rewriting your story from a positive perspective that allows you to surround yourself with love and compassion, that allows you to see yourself as the person who was always loved and held. I'm going to tell you just a really quick little story that just popped into my mind from my past. When I was an adolescent, I had really severe acne, and I was terribly self-conscious, terribly shy, and basically I hated myself in every possible way. I felt rejected and laughed at by my peers. I never got invited to go to any dances. I never went to a prom. I never went to a homecoming event. And the one time I did attend a school dance in junior high, the very first dance we had, my first year in junior high, I stood off in the corner and never once was asked to dance. And I actually spent much of that evening in the bathroom in a stall crying. And so for years, I carried that story within me. I carried around this image of myself as this poor, ugly girl that no one wanted to be friends with and no one wanted to dance with. And I saw myself in this terribly sad light. Now, that was partly influenced by experiences from much earlier in my childhood that I won't get into, but I just wanted to talk about this one story I had about myself, which was that I was never asked to dance. And that was a terribly hurtful story that I kept bringing up to myself over and over again whenever I really wanted to torture myself or punish myself for something I thought I had done wrong. But later on in my life, it was probably 20 years later, I went to my high school class reunion. And there, one of my old classmates asked me to dance at my class reunion, and while we were on the dance floor, said to me, "You don't know this, but I had the biggest crush on you when we were in high school." And I said, "What?" And I was completely shocked and stunned because that didn't fit with the story I'd been telling myself my whole life about who I was when I was in junior high and high school. And he said, "Oh, I had a crush on you for years," but he said, "I was just way too shy and I didn't have enough self-esteem to ever even talk to you or say a word to you." I was completely stunned because he was telling such a different story than the story that was written in my head. And I literally went home and I had to rethink that over and over again and rehear the words he said to me in order to convince myself that I was carrying the wrong story. I was carrying a very slanted story that did not tell the whole picture whatsoever. And that one dance at my high school reunion allowed me to completely rewrite the story of my past and to make so much more room for other things that were happening as the same time. This time when I was wounded and felt bad about myself, so was this other person who was wounded and felt bad about himself. And who had some positive feelings toward me that I never got to experience, but suddenly I could see how, well, it was all fine. It was all okay. We were all just going through adolescence, which is a really tough time. And I could suddenly let go of that old story that I had used so many times to beat myself up with and rewrite it and change it and heal it because I had new information that helped me see it differently. So that's the power of retelling and rewriting our old stories. But sometimes we have to look for that new information. We have to recognize like we are stuck telling ourselves one story over and over again that may not be completely accurate. So we have to be open to new information coming in and new stories to add to our old stories, to help us modify them, but to also help us bring more love and compassion into those old memories. So that's what number 3 is about. Reframe it. Letting more love and compassion in, allowing our stories to be retold from new perspectives, from different angles, and to be looked at differently than the way we've always told them throughout our lives. And so before I go, I wanted to return to this idea that could all of this have been a gift? If we did experience pain and losses and wounds during our childhood, could that in some way have been a gift? And is it outrageous for me to even suggest that it may? And again, I understand and I don't judge if it does feel outrageous and that feels impossible for you to even begin to conceive of it in that way. But I wanted to share with you a quote from Pete Walker. And this quote is, "The broken heart that has been healed through grieving is stronger and more loving than the one that has never been injured." So I wanted to close with just that thought for you to contemplate, because I'm kind of reveling in it myself right now, this idea that it is not the worst thing in the world to have had your heart broken. It is not the worst thing to have been through challenges and difficulties and suffering, because it is a path. If we choose to bring healing onto that path, healing with love and forgiveness, and by going through our own process of mourning, that path of the broken heart can lead us to a place where we can be stronger and more loving than ever before. We can become our own best selves and be even better than we ever could have achieved before, had we not gone through the challenges that have helped us get stronger and more loving. So I just wanted to end with that quote as something for us to contemplate and think about. As you contemplate, could any of this have been a gift? Is there some way that what you have been through has been a positive thing in your life that has actually helped you grow more than you could even imagine? And I hope so. I hope that's true for you. And I hope that you're able to see that as well. And I hope you've been able to retell and rewrite your stories and find all the beauty and all the goodness and all the love that has been there for you throughout your entire journey so far. And if there's never been enough beauty or love or joy or kindness, I hope that you are finding it now. I hope that it is surrounding you and pouring around you now, so that you can make up for everything that has been missing in the past for you. So I'll be back next week with another episode. And until then, remember, we're here for love. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your unique and very precious life. Bye-bye.